This is a message to all my supporters of this podcast. I'm introducing a new supporters program. You can contribute a small amount as a one-off payment to show your love for this podcast. Thank you in advance for all your contributions.
This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. I am a corporate employee with an entrepreneurial mindset. This podcast will help and support you with new ideas about business. These are my thoughts, ideas and comments. Today we're going to talk about criticism and how you should respond to criticism and the different techniques that you have. Hopefully you will find it helpful. Thank you. Hi everyone, it's Mark Hayward from the Absolute Business Mindset podcast and YouTube channel. Hopefully you are well. Today we're going to talk about how to receive criticism and what you need to do when you're dealing with criticism. So I'm going to take you through a couple of ways of being able to deal with it, whether it's negatively or positively. Some of it is a little bit down to your mindset and where you're getting your criticism from, but it's also very important that you do take it in positively, but I'm going to talk you through negatively as well. So criticism. We all have criticism from one person or another, whether that is someone at work, whether that is a husband, wife, partner, or whether it is a friend, a colleague, or a family member. But I'm going to talk, it's going to be a little bit around business-wise, but obviously being a business podcast, but I think these sorts of principles can be sort of held upon all different types of people and all different types of ways of being able to do it. So you get your criticism, you can either deal with it positively or negatively. So I'm going to talk you through initially negatively and some of the techniques that you can do with it when you deal with it negatively. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about it positively and some of my thoughts at the end there. So let's talk about the first way of dealing with things, which is to deal with it negatively. So if you get criticized and you don't believe it is warranted, you can deal with it negatively. And one way of dealing with it negatively is to decide to leave your job if you've got that criticism from a job perspective. So you can work out that actually the criticism wasn't warranted, wasn't deserved, and therefore you can then get an exit strategy of being able to get out of that job. So some people deal with that in that way. Some people don't. I would say that you've got to be able to find an alternative route if you are going to deal with it negatively and wanting to leave that role. You could decide to ignore it. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cold as well, so I apologise for that. So you could decide to ignore it, but equally that is failing as well, because criticism or feedback, as it's often called in the corporate world, if you do ignore it completely, there is a pretty good chance you're going to get constant response, which is going to be negatively against it. So if you're comfortable that you might be let go and you don't really mind, then you can just ignore the feedback, carry on your merry way, and potentially have an element of failure, because if they ask you to leave, then you've responded to the feedback, to the criticism badly, and not really dealt with it. It's one of the ways that people sometimes stick their head in the sand and aren't able to deal with these sorts of situations. Third way is you can leave on your terms, so you can decide that this is the way that you want to deal with things, and actually you want to leave, but you need to leave on your terms rather than on anyone else's. So you can make a conscious choice that you're actually going to go, but equally you do it on when it suits you rather than when it suits them. The fourth point is, so I put here, there's a couple of offshoots to this point, which is if you don't play the company game. So some people call it politics, some people call it a game. I think in most environments there is some sort of clique, there is some sort of hierarchy, there's some sort of priority of people in your team. And if you decide that you're not going to play the game, you can equally just step out out of it and just deliver on your daily role, tasks, whatever it is. But I do think you do need to be mindful that if you are dealing with it in that sort of way, that you're just abstaining, it could make a slower progression. So we talk a lot about getting promoted and moving things along in your lifestyle. And if you don't play the game, you might have to wait until other people who do play the game give priority above you. So if you don't play the game, you're likely to get negative feedback again. So if you decide that what you are going to do is you're going to deal with it negatively, the likelihood of continual or escalation is going to happen. So you might get that sort of feedback again. It could be worse, it could be more severe. Secondly, you could play the waiting game and wait for a change in leadership. Invariably, there is movement of people, always in companies, in sort of big companies. Either people leave on their own terms or they are pushed out. So you could decide that you're going to wait and play the waiting game. You could move to a different business unit. So as I work in a big corporate, there's always opportunities to move to different teams. That's another way of just accepting that it doesn't work at the moment and you need to find something different. Or you can decide, that you can stick on your place and you're happy where you are, what role you're doing. Even if you're not playing the game, it might still be all right to be able just to stick on your salary and not progress. So that's our negative sort of view. Equally, there is also, you can deal with these things positively. So I've got some ideas on how to deal with it positively. So you could be really proactive and positive about that feedback. Feedback, actually, if you're in a business, is actually quite a good thing. It can really give you a good focus on what you need to deliver, and you can deal with it and say, well, actually, I might have misstepped, I might have done something wrong, but actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to deliver even more than is expected, which is everything you should do in a role. You should be expecting to deliver on a high quality all the time. You could play their game, whether that is being nice to people, whether it's working with other people, trying to work with other people. There's a lot of cliques that happen in offices, and I would say that you do need to be able to play the game to an extent. You could just work really hard and just double down your efforts. Perception is incredibly important in corporate environments, and it's very important to be able to deal with any sort of criticism, is to double down on what you're doing. Now that might be longer hours, that might be it might just be delivering high quality, which you should be doing anyway, but equally you could triple down on what you're trying to deliver. You could also deliver on what you're doing and then ask for more work, whether that's from a particular key person. Bring other people in to your world is equally a good way. You could also have regular reviews. So if you've received criticism, you could have regular reviews on how you're progressing and how you're developing, and therefore it's a good way of being able to get that sort of feedback positively and being a good corporate citizen. And we've talked about this before, but I think just being a good corporate guy is really important when you're working in a role. Whether it's small businesses are slightly different. There's cliques, but there's not necessarily this sort of concept of being a good corporate citizen. But that equally, it could be a good company man. You can deliver well and be a high performer. And all these ideas that I've talked about here are ways of being able to respond positively to a criticism. So what you got to see is, so that's negative and that's positive, and equally you got to see that criticism is actually feedback. Feedback is never a bad thing. Equally, bad feedback can actually be a really good focus on your mind on what you want to deliver. You can learn a lot from that. You can learn a lot from about the company as well, if you do receive that sort of criticism. One key thing is to realise that it is possible to change people's opinions. If people have a perception of you that you don't work hard, you don't triple down on things, you can change opinions. Some of these things of working longer hours, working harder, better quality, regular reviews, being a good corporate citizen, there is ways of being able to change people's perceptions and people's views on you. So, and lastly, I would just say be strong and be committed to your cause. If you want to work there, you want to deliver, you want to stay there, then you do need to just be strong and commit to that case. Right, that's the end of the podcast. You can find me in all the usual places: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Equally, any feedback that you've got about the podcast or anything you'd like to talk about, then please send it to absolutebussinessmindset@gmail.com. I'd love to get your feedback and see what your thoughts are on the podcast and the YouTube channel. If you're on YouTube, can you give me a thumbs up, give me a like? That would be fantastic. That will help the channel. If you're on the podcast, please subscribe, please do download, and hopefully I will speak to you again soon. Thank you very much.